us pray. O God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come. Almighty and everlasting God, we thank you for giving us another day. Assist the members of this chamber as they debate important issues facing this nation. Once again, we begin with prayer to acknowledge our dependence on you as our Creator, Redeemer, and Sustainer. Bless our President, the citizens of this land. Give us perseverance to press on through discouragement and gratitude to acknowledge you in any success. For you have been the people's guide for the past 300 years. So, Lord God, what we know not, teach us. What we have not, give us. What we are not, make us. Through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. Say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
This House is in session. Minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday, November 14th, 2023, and Tuesday, November 21st, 2023 to be confirmed. Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be confirmed.
Questions that the aforementioned minutes be confirmed. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are hereby confirmed. Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I am commanded to lay the Customs Tariff Amendment Order 2023, also the audited financial statements of the New Life Investment Company, Inc. for the financial year 2017 to 2018, as well as the audited financial statements for New Life Investment Company, Inc. for the financial year 2018 to 2019.
Government notices, private members' notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills.
Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the first reading of the Cybercrime Bill 2023. I also beg to move the first reading of the Mutual Assistance in Criminal Matters Amendment Bill 2023.
Questions that the aforementioned bills be read here first time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of Standing Orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42 subsection 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
The questions that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Government business, sir.
Government business is the order of the day.
Order number 9, in the name of the Honourable Senior Minister in the Prime Minister's Office, to move the passing of a resolution to approve the Barbados Physical Development Plan as amended 2023.
Honourable Member for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I thought it fitting for such a historic debate that we should start with the resolution as it is before this Honourable House. Whereas it is provided by Section 16.7 of the Planning and Development Act 2019 that Director of Planning and Development shall submit for the approval of the Minister a development plan for the island. And whereas a development plan called the Barbados Physical Development Plan was submitted to the Minister on the 8th day of July 1970, and in accordance with Section 10.2 of the Town and Country Planning Act 240, came into operation on the 15th day of March 1977. And whereas, in accordance with Section 11 of the Town and Country Planning Act, Cap 240, proposals for alterations to the Barbados Physical Development Plan were submitted to the Minister on the 7th day of February 1985. And in accordance with Section 10.2 of the Town and Country Planning Act 240, the amendments to the development plan came into operation on the 1st of August 1991. And whereas, in accordance with Section 11 of the Town and Country Act, Cap 240, proposals for alterations to the Barbados Physical Development Plan were submitted to the Minister on the 30th day of April 1998 and the 29th day of January 2003, respectively. And in accordance with Section 10.2 of the Town and Country Planning Act, Cap 240, the amendments to development came into operation on the 15th day of April 2008. And whereas, in accordance with Section 16.3 of the Planning and Development Act 2019, certain objections, representations with respect to the Barbados Physical Development Plan were made in writing to the Director of Planning and Development, who, in accordance with that section, prepared a report to the Minister. And whereas, in accordance with Section 16.5 of the Planning and Development Act 2019, the Minister appointed the Chairman, Mr. Kenneth Affley, to hold separate public inquiries into those objections and representations. And whereas certain amendments which were proposed by the Minister under Section 16 of the Planning and Development Act 2019 have been approved by the Cabinet on the 19th day of October 2023, and whereas it is provided by Section 16.7 of the Planning and Development Act 2019 that amendments to a development plan shall be submitted for the approval of both houses, be it resolved, therefore, that the House of Assembly and the Senate approve the Barbados Physical Development Plan as amended in 2023 and prior plans be rescinded. Mr. Speaker, I start there because the Barbados Physical Development Plan has a long, long history. Indeed, Barbados is the only country in the CARICOM that once we agree in this Honourable House and the other place to approve this Barbados Physical Development Plan, it will be the only country in the CARICOM with an approved physical development plan. Now granted, based on what you've heard me read, this current Barbados Physical Development Plan, the one that we're hoping to approve, will be late. It is a significant piece of work and a tremendous document that adds to the Barbados landscape. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, these two volumes first came to this Honourable House, well, last came to this Honourable House when I was sitting back in the backbenches of the government. Ironically, exactly where the member for St. Michael South Central sits today. And it's important to understand the significance of this because the tremendous work that was done by the member for St. Michael South Central to get this document to where it is today. And all I'm doing, Mr. Speaker, is taking the baton for the final leg to get it over the finish line. But I must say, and I must commend the tremendous work, not only for the Physical Development Plan, but also for the Planning and Development Act 2019 that I spoke to in the resolution. And I think this Honourable House would do well to commend the tremendous work done by the member for St. Michael South Central and the work that she did in getting the Physical Development Plan to what it is today. Now, granted, Mr. Speaker, she was not alone. And of course, had a tremendous team working with her to be able to get this plan to where it was. Indeed, the genesis of this plan stretches over many years, as you would expect. And the government team stretched over 2 chief town planners and a director of planning. And I haven't asked for your permission, but I would like to make mention to the tremendous effort given by members to be able to get this plan to where it is today. From the Town Country Development Department, formerly Town Country Department, now the Planning Development Department, we had the then Chief Town Planner, Mr. Mark Cummins. He was followed by the next Chief Town Planner, Mr. George Brown, Mr. Rudy Headley, Mr. Trevor Leach, Alison Broom, Philippe Arthur, Theron Seeley, Paula Smith, and Philip O'Neill. That is just at the Planning and Development Department. But that is by no means all of the people that contributed to this document as it is today. In addition, there was a project steering committee, and that committee included people from many, many ministries. And in addition to that, there were consultants as well who contributed to the plan. The project steering committee was the chief agricultural officer and representatives. Thank you. The chief technical officer of the Ministry of Transport and Works and its representatives. The general manager of the Barbados Water Authority and representatives. The director of the Natural Heritage Department and representatives. The director of the Environmental Protection Department and representatives. The director of the Coastal Zone Management Unit and representatives. The director of the Drainage Unit and representatives. The management of the Investment Unit and representatives. And of course, the Prime Minister's Office, the DPS and the PS, and all of the people involved in the Prime Minister's Office to be able to get that. This is a whole government approach kind of document that brought everybody together, working together, pulling in the same direction to get the document to where it is today, because it is such an important and vital document for the development of this country going forward for the next 10 years, if not further. And it didn't end there, Mr. Speaker. In addition to the member from this Honourable Chamber, in addition to the members from the Planning and Development Department, in addition to all of the members that I mentioned just now from the various ministries, there were a consultant team from the private sector as well working on the document. The main consultant was Urban Strategies, and they had Melanie Hare, George Dark, Anna Anuku, Tyler Barker, Aslam Sheikh, Justin Myron, Anna Ingberstein, Corey Balick, Matthew Keeling, Christian Yin, Jay Lee, Aidan Ferris, Cole Goody, Lauren Hain, and Christy Chin. That is just the team that was in Canada working to put this document to where it is. In addition, we had the local people as well. We had Eco Oil Consulting made up of Dr. Yolan Aline, Dr. Vernice Innes, Derek Odderson, Rico Knight. We had Ash Prudentia, which was Sharon Griffith, Environmental Planning Group, Jeff Ramsey and Deborah Ramsey. We had Hydrotera, which was Leslie Barker and Robin Barker. There was Richard Gill Associates, that had Richard and Andy Gill. Savanta, that had Tom Hilditch and Kimberly Arnold. And then we had individuals as well, like Sir Frank Aline, Luther Bourne, Dr. Christina Cameron, Sir Henry Fraser, Dr. Ray Furlong, Dr. Malcolm Hendry, Lionel Nurse, Dr. Frederick H. Smith, Leslie Wallen, Dr. Carl Watson. This is a tremendous document, Mr. Speaker. And the reason that we had those people making contributions is because in addition to all of the physical development that went before and all the planning that went before, certain background reports were necessary. And 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 people could not get all those background reports done. So what they did is they split up the work, and then everybody made a contribution to make the document what it is. So for instance, Climate Change and Disaster Risk Management, that was prepared by Eco Oil Consulting, Leslie Wallen and Malcolm Hendry. Green Economy was prepared by the Environmental Planning Group. Agriculture was prepared by Sir Frank Aline and Urban Strategies. Fisheries, also by the same people. Renewable Energy by Eco Oil Consulting again. Resource Extraction, another important aspect, prepared by Hydrotera. National Infrastructure, prepared by Ash and Prudentia Inc. National Park was prepared by the Environmental Planning Group. Solid Waste Management was prepared by Ash Prudentia. Tourism, Environmental Planning Group. Transport and Roads was prepared by Ash Prudentia. Water and Sewage, the same group. Natural Heritage, prepared by Eco Isle and Malcolm Hendry collaborating. Drainage by Savanta. Education, prepared by Eco Isle Consulting. Health, Housing, Industry, Population, all by Urban Strategies. Recreation by Eco Isle. Retail by Eco Isle. Social and Community Eco Isle Consulting. Special Industries, also by them. And an important one, Heritage, prepared by Christina Cameron and Frederick Smith. So, Mr. Speaker, you can imagine the collaboration that went into producing this document. And bringing all of those background information, bringing all of those people together, and getting all of those people working together, the private sector doing their part, the public sector doing their part, bringing it all together to produce these 2 volumes that will go in history and last this country that we love so much for so many years to come. Mr. Speaker, I now want to get into the meat of my presentation, but I thought it was very, very important to set the backdrop so that we understand exactly all of the work that has gone into it and the importance and the historic significance of this presentation here this morning. The Physical Development Plan is a policy document that sets out a vision and a framework for Barbados' growth and progressive development. The last Physical Development Plan was adopted in 2003. Since then, Barbados has experienced many significant changes and made many important commitments and initiatives at the national, regional, and global levels. These include Greening Economy Scoping Strategy, the Habitat 3 New Agenda, the COP21 Paris Agreement on Climate Change, the UNESCO World Heritage Site inscription for historic Bridgetown and its garrison, and the Emerging Cities Initiative. These changes required the government to rethink and reshape development strategies and policies to align them with national vision and goals. The amendment to the Physical Development Plan presents a critical opportunity to respond to key development issues, community development opportunities prevailing on the island over the past 20 years. The Planning and Development Department, in accordance with Sections 15 and 16 of the Planning and Development Act 2019, has undertaken the comprehensive and participatory process to amend the Physical Development Plan with the support of key stakeholders and the public. The process involved a detailed assessment of effectiveness of the existing policies, an assessment of recent development and settlement patterns, and the consideration of critical new factors, initiatives, and commitments. It also involved the extensive consultation and engagement with stakeholders, including government agencies, private sector, civil society, academia, and the general public. The extensive public consultation process at all phases and stages of its preparation has ensured the robust public engagement so necessary for a national level policy document, consistent with the government's commitment for openness and transparency, but more so to ensure that such community engagement increases the visibility and understanding of planning and development issues. Such engagement empowered communities across Barbados to have their say over decisions that affect their lives, their towns, cities, and neighborhoods, and has shaped the framework for planning and development decision-making process. I'm going to stop there. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, you and I know there was a time in Barbados when you would see somebody start construction and you would have to ask, well, where's it going up there though? Where's it y'all building? How that going to affect us? That is no longer the case in Barbados. Now, any development of a certain size has to put up a billboard. That billboard has to be up for a certain period of time. After that, in addition to having that billboard up, They are required to put an advertisement in the newspaper. You see it now very often, small little square about 6 inches by 4 inches or 5 to 7, whatever it is, in the paper saying that this is that a planning application is being done at this location. For further information, go onto the website. You go onto the website and it's hosted on the website at the Planning Development Department. Any person can go and see what that application is for, how tall it's going to be, how big it's going to be, how much parking spaces it's going to have. Everything on that application. Then you can object. You can write in and object to the application. It's going to cause shadowing. It's going to affect the traffic. It's going to have smells. The drive-through is going to be blocking up my driveway. Whatever it may be. All of these things now have a consultative, and people have a consultative and opportunity to come and object. And their objections, one by one, are heard and dealt with by the Planning Development Department and the board. And the board. So that now everybody has a chance to say what can happen in their community, object to it, and make representation. And all of those things are considered before that application gets permission, and modified accordingly as well as things are necessary and see fit. Again, something that was spearheaded by the Honourable Member for St. Michael, South Central. The Physical Development Plan 2023 is intended to provide a vision for sustainable growth and development of the nation by setting up policies to guide the relationships among land use, built form, mobility, community facilities, and physical structure. It addresses major issues and opportunities, such as land scarcity for agriculture and future large-scale subdivisions for affordable housing, transport challenges, preparing for climate change, and transitioning to a green economy, as well as protecting cultural heritage. It also includes 9 community plans that provide more detailed direction to support sustainable development. And I want to talk a little bit about the community plans. The Physical Development Plan Part B, which is a separate section right here, this is just the community plans. The Physical Development Plan Part B contains 9 community plans, each with its own objectives and goals that provide more place-specific policy direction for the respective areas within the National Settlement Framework and the 9 principles of the plan. These plans provide strategic land use and built form policy to guide development in each area by taking into consideration the unique character of each community area. The community area-specific policies are designed within the National Planning Strategy to accommodate steady state growth that focuses on reinvestment in existing settlement areas and community cores, address the scarcity in food, water, and land, and create healthy, walkable communities for the present population and the diverse and aging population of the future. The community plans for the major growth areas are Bridgetown, the national centre, Spikestown, a regional centre, Whole Town, another regional centre, Oistins, 6 Crossroads, Warrens, an emerging regional centre, Wildy, an emerging regional centre, Belle Plaine, a national park village, and Bathsheba, another national park village. These plans build on the previous planning policy for each area and detail specific and local policy directions in terms of sustainability, land use, built form, placemaking, public realm, natural heritage, infrastructure, and heritage on its own. The individual plans articulate a community vision for the settlement area, principles, policies, and urban structure, including the boundary of the respective community area. The vision and goals or objectives for each plan are detailed below. And of course, we would have to start with Bridgetown. And I'm sure the Honourable Member for the City of Bridgetown not only knows this well because I gave a presentation to his branch not so long ago, and he reported to me that it was very, very well received. The vision for Bridgetown. The Bridgetown Community Plan responds to the current physical conditions of Bridgetown and expands upon the Physical Development Plan amended 2023 policies. The plan outlines the present context, identifies opportunities, and establishes strategic direction and provides a broad policy framework for the larger area and more detailed local area planning. Bridgetown's development will be in keeping with the UN Sustainable Development Goal 11 to make cities inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. It will be a clean, attractive, and vibrant urban core supporting a variety of activity both night and day for local residents, businesses, nationals, and tourists. The historical setting and unique cultural offering distinguish the Bridgetown experience as more than somewhere to work or shop. It is an authentic place to live, gather, share, and celebrate Barbadian community and culture. The urban landscape is embraced and defined by the beauty and the healthy ecosystems within Carlisle Bay and the Constitution River Corridor. The community core of Bridgetown is constituted as a series of places and experiences recognized in a community plan through 4 urban designed areas, each with its own character, scale, and defining function. Bridgetown is intentionally planned as a place with greater density in built form, diversity in housing, accessibility to transportation choice, and resiliency in addressing disaster risk reduction. Goals and objectives. Strengthen the vitality of the National Centre and its unique role as the nation's primary hub of retail, cultural activities, and nationally significant institutions. Celebrate historic Bridgetown and its garrison as an internationally recognized World Heritage Site. Embed coastal resiliency and disaster risk reduction in all aspects of growth and investment. Promote the distinct tourism experiences offered in Bridgetown, revitalize commercial activity within Bridgetown, and enhance the network of urban open spaces and gathering spaces. In addition, we will advance mobility and increase transportation choice and promote increased residential population and the livability of the Bridgetown core. I now turn to Speightstown. The vision for Speightstown will preserve and capitalize on its strong base of cultural and natural heritage assets to become a unique tourist destination and model of the green and blue economy. The historic community core will be revitalized as a regional center, providing amenities, services, and transportation options for the northern part of the island. Investment in infrastructure will improve the public realm and waterfront access for the enjoyment of residents and visitors alike, and will improve the community's resiliency to the effects of climate change. The goals and objectives are 1, to preserve and celebrate Speightstown's remarkable cultural heritage, 2, to promote increased residential population and the livability of Speightstown, 3, to strengthen Queen Street as the main commercial and institutional spine of Speightstown, 4, to continue to develop and promote Speightstown green and blue economy and authentic tourism experience, 5, to enhance multimodal mobility, recognizing Speightstown's role as the northernmost mobility node in the island mobility network, 6, to improve the public realm on the bypass road corridor as a key entryway to the core, 7, to improve walkability throughout the community, and 8, to improve the visibility and accessibility of the waterfront. I now turn to Whole Town and its vision. The Whole Town Community Plan builds on the previous planning policies for Whole Town and responds to the current physical conditions. The plan outlines the present context, identifies opportunities, and establishes strategic direction that identifies areas for further in-depth design, engineering, and environmental analysis. The policy is supported by development standards that provide direction regarding the appropriate scale and form of development. Whole Town will become a sustainable regional center that is a model of resiliency in the face of extreme weather and a changing climate. It will strengthen its tourism offering while ensuring the continued development of amenities. Serving the local population, Whole Town will provide a high quality of life for residents and visitors, enhancing walkability, community facilities, and open spaces. Investment in infrastructure and private development will demonstrate sustainable and resilient design solutions. The goals and objectives: embed coastal resiliency with disaster risk reduction in all aspects of growth, improve stormwater management and alleviate flooding, embrace the waterfront as a public space, celebrate cultural heritage as central to the identity of Old Town, continue to build up and diversify the tourism industry, and improve the walkability of the community while enhancing the multimodal mobility both for locals and visitors to Old Town. I turn now to Oistins. Oistins will become an enhanced regional center with a revitalized core, a diversified economic base, and a vibrant public realm. Central Oistins will be shaped by a focus on its cultural heritage, historic and contemporary role in the fishing industry, and the community and commercial amenities it provides to residents throughout the region. New development in Oistins will focus on improving its role in the green and blue economy and resiliency as a coastal community. Its goals and objectives: to create a remarkable and resilient working waterfront, to embed coastal resiliency and disaster risk reduction in all aspects of growth, strengthen Oistins Main Road as the central spine of the community, reinforce Oistins' current and historic role as a fishing hub, enhance multimodal mobility, recognizing Oistins' role in the island mobility network, as well as improving walkability and creating and celebrating Oistins' cultural heritage. Six Roads, the vision. Six Roads will continue to develop as a regional center, providing a range of amenities and community uses for increased population in the southeast portion of the island. New development and investment will focus on improving the cohesiveness of the community with greater emphasis on pedestrian connectivity and the public realm. Six Crossroads will embrace its potential as an inland community that is at reduced risk from the climate crisis and will prioritize maintaining the improving resiliency in its future growth. The goals and objectives: increase walkability in and around Six Roads, infill and intensify where possible in the community core, capitalize on the institutional cluster as a civic campus, introduce a mobility node on the vacant parcel south of the roundabout as it redevelops, support the relationship between Six Crossroads community core and the IRDP area to the west, support the development of a stronger cultural and entertainment offering in Six Roads, and improving the public realm. Warrens, Mr. Speaker. The vision for Warrens will continue to develop as an emerging regional center with a nationally significant cluster of retail and office employment. Future development will take place within a planned community structure that emphasizes sustainability, connectivity, and a high-quality public realm. A mix of uses, including high-density residential and community facilities, will be introduced into Warrens to create a more complete community. The goals and objective would be to re-urbanize the community by creating a local street and block pattern to facilitate urban, higher density development. Support medium and high-density residential uses in Warrens, promote sustainable and resilient development, reduce the visual and physical barrier of the highway corridor, invest in creating a high-quality public realm, and enhance the transportation choices to and from Warrens. Wildy. Wildy will continue to develop as an emerging regional center with a national significant cluster of employment, education, recreation, and institutional uses. Further growth will be accommodated through intensification and redevelopment and supported by innovative transportation solutions. Connections between complementary uses east of the Errol Barrow Highway will be strengthened to create a green, walkable, and active health and wellness precinct. Improvements to the public realm and pedestrian infrastructure will tie the Wildy Community Plan area together. The goals and objectives define 4 distinct areas by function within the Wildy Community Plan: promoting sustainable and resilient development, plan for a connected health and wellness precinct east of the Errol Barrow Highway, enhance the transportation choices to and from Wildy, address traffic congestion and autocentricity within Wildy, very important, support Wildy as the employment area, define a gateway into Wildy, encourage high-quality mixed-use redevelopment of the Wildy Triangle as a distinguishing anchor of the area. Belle Plaine. Belle Plaine will embrace its role as a regional center and the center of the national park to become a unique tourism destination and a model of the green and blue economy. It will strengthen its tourism offering while building up a suite of community services and amenities to serve the local population. The economy of Belle Plaine will be reinvigorated through innovative and sustainable initiatives in the area, including organic farming, ecological restoration, and nature tourism in the national park. Goals and objectives: it will reinforce Belle Plaine as the center of Barbados' national park, revitalize the former civic hub at the heart of Belle Plaine, celebrate Belle Plaine's location along the National Scenic Parkway, conserve the natural heritage of the area and encourage respectful visitor interaction, improve mobility and connectivity between Belle Plaine and the rest of the island, as well as embrace the principles of the green and blue economy and nature tourism for economic regeneration, as well as develop a local food hub in the Belle Plaine community core. And the final one, Bathsheba. The vision for Bathsheba: Bathsheba will capitalize on its strong natural heritage assets to continue to develop as a tourism-focused national park village and local center. It will strengthen its tourism offering, generating economic benefits for local residents. Development and investment in Bathsheba will improve the quality and diversity of its amenity for both residents and visitors, while respecting its rural character and quality of life. The goals and objectives will reinforce Bathsheba as a key node of the Barbados National Park system along the National Park Scenic Route, enhance the public realm experience for locals and tourists, and develop new tourist accommodations, embracing the fishing and agricultural heritage of the area. And that is what the goals are. You know, Mr. Speaker, a document like this, with so many wonderful pictures and maps and pictorials. You know, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. And if a picture is worth 1,000 words, and they have a document with 400 pages, of which 300 have pictures on, I could speak for 2 days on this. But I know that at the Christmas time, at this time of year, nobody wants to come here and listen to somebody speaking for 2 days. So I will continue on, be concise and precise, and leave those long speeches for others who like to hear themselves for long periods of time. Land use. Visions. Here we are. Land use. The plan proposes to identify and protect areas of high ecological value and biodiversity, and to promote sustainable land use practices. Transportation. The plan proposes to improve transportation network by enhancing public transportation, promoting active transportation modes such as walking and cycling, and improving road safety. Housing. The plan proposes to increase the supply of affordable housing and to promote the development of mixed-use communities. Climate change. The plan proposes to promote climate change adaptation and mitigation measures, including the use of renewable energy sources and the reduction of greenhouse gases. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, the renewable energy is something very, very near and dear to my heart. Indeed, what we were able to do as well is to be able to plot out, not finding, oh, here I know, where all the renewable energy development has taken place. And it is tremendous to see all of the various locations that the renewable energy development has taken place across this country. And it's very, very important to understand, because we are in a very, very important time in this country where we transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy. And you see all across Barbados, there are people, small and large, medium-sized, are taking part in getting renewable energy and getting into the renewable energy transition. Of course, this, Mr. Speaker, is not to be left out, is the growth management framework. And this one shows all of the applications and permissions that were given not only in renewable energy, but for housing, commercial infrastructure, all across the country. As you can see very, very clearly, to be able to get through all of these applications all across the country, not centered in any one place, but scattered all over, showing the tremendous work, in addition to all of their normal work done by the Planning and Development Department to get all of these permissions through, they were able to collate and bring this document as well to the Parliament of this country. Thank you for that commendation. Visions and principles. The Physical Development Plan seeks to achieve a vision for Barbados over the next 10 years as a nation of healthy, safe, distinct, age and gender responsive communities, sharing a common economic base and community aspiration. A nation in which resilient, sustainable economic and physical growth are balanced with conservation and restoration of irreplaceable resources, rural working landscapes, cultural heritage and natural heritage. A nation which fosters a green economy, focused on strategies to enhance resource efficiency and economic growth, in particular in the sectors of agriculture, fisheries, housing, transportation, renewable energy, and tourism. A nation characterized by increasing social equity, enabling meaningful participation in social, economic activities for everyone. A nation which is resilient and prepared for the impacts of climate change. The following principles underlie the policies of the plan: the efficient use of land resources and finances of the nation, the adoption of adaptive planning approaches in all respects of national and sectoral planning for the consideration of climate variability and climate change impacts, the promotion of social equity, health and safety for all residents, the conservation, protection and restoration of irreplaceable core assets and man-made resources, the development of safe, vibrant places for people to live, work and play, the management of growth so that it occurs in a safe, logical and orderly fashion, ensuring protection of core assets, reduction of environmental risks and ecological scarcities, promotion of sustainable development and efficiency in delivery of the infrastructure. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I thought that we should give a little background and purpose to the Physical Development Plan. The first Physical Development Plan, as you heard in the resolution, came into full operation in 1976. Since then, the country's economic, demographic, and physical development experienced many important changes, making it critical at intervals to carry out an island-wide review. This resulted in the adoption of an updated plan in 1991, and again in 2003, and a draft prepared in 2017. Today, Barbados remains the only nation in the Caribbean to have a current national physical development plan. The Physical Development Plan, therefore, is an opportunity to advance foundational change at both national and community scales to guide the nation toward a sustainable and resilient country for future generations. The current Physical Development Plan, intended to inform decisions to 2010 to 2003 one, it was approved by both houses in 2007 and adopted in 2008. The structure sets out in its introduction the vision for the future growth and development of the island through the provision of strategic policies grounded in a sustainable development framework. It contains several policies that address issues related to growth, management, and agricultural preservation, housing, social and community facilities, cultural heritage, environment and economic development, tourism and recreation, transport, resource extraction, and the Barbados National Park. The Government of Barbados, through the then Town Country Planning Office, now the Planning and Development Department, in accordance with the provisions of the Town Country Planning Act 240, commenced the review of the Physical Development Plan by conducting an updated island survey. Given the outdated data, research and policies of the PDP amended, including the land use strategies needed to be amended to reflect and implement the changing social, economic and environmental adjustments experienced at the time. The Physical Development Plan amended successfully managed Barbados' growth during the first decade of the 21st century. In order to build on and strengthen this success, the following areas: agriculture, the introduction of strategic environmental impact assessments, the further expansion of the urban corridor, the national infrastructure system, the management of cultural heritage and conservation areas, the protection of aquifers, among others, required urgent review to ensure that development continued to be sustainable. Furthermore, the updated version had to pay particular attention to Barbados development for a 10-year period. The government at the time, in its long-term and medium-term strategic plans, was committed to moving towards an environmentally advanced green economy by strengthening the island's physical infrastructure and preserving the environment. This concept was embraced while speaking to a vision for the future. To inform the green economy concept, a scoping study was commissioned in 2010, which identified a number of priority areas. The scoping study focused on 5 sectors: agriculture, fisheries, housing, transportation, and tourism, and 4 cross-cutting issues: waste, water, energy, and land. These sectors were chosen based on their strategic importance for the further development of the Barbadian economy. Following the survey of the island and the review of the relevant studies, initiatives, and representations, 24 background sectoral reports representing the following areas were completed in October 2015. The ones that I intimated the various people made their contributions: climate change and disaster, agriculture, fisheries, renewable energy, resource extraction, national infrastructure, national park, solid waste management, tourism, transport and works, water and sewage, natural heritage, drainage, education, health, housing, industry, population, recreation, retail, social and community services, special industry, and cultural heritage. Just those alone. And all of those having reports would tell you how cross-cutting and how encompassing an umbrella of physical development plan is for a nation, as it covers all of those aspects and even more. These reports from the survey and findings inform the policies of the draft Physical Development Plan amended 2017. Critically, the research showed that growth and development patterns were not sustainable over the long term. The plan was completed in December 2016, and public engagement through community meetings was launched in 2017 at the LASC, and thereafter 6 community meetings were held to inform the public. However, that draft Physical Development Plan was not adopted as a final stage where the Physical Development Plan was relayed in Parliament was never accomplished. And of course, you and I know why. Because of course, in 2018, there was a general election when this Barbados Labour Party administration was resoundingly returned to office. And with that, of course, the change of government, it was important for this new administration's mandate to be reflected in the policies of the Physical Development Plan. So then, under the strong stewardship of the members of St. Michael South Central, the gap analysis of the draft Physical Development Plan was undertaken to scope the general extent of the required amendments. The purpose of that analysis was to highlight gaps in the vision, policy, framework, and development principles outlined in the draft Physical Development Plan, and those of the current government administration with respect to the issues identified. Similarly, the regulatory framework, including the Town Country Planning Act of 1965, was not perceived as facilitating investments that could reinforce economic growth and sustainable development. Consequently, the 1965 Act was replaced by the Planning and Development Act of 2019, again piloted by the member for St. Michael South Central and proclaimed in December of 2021. The Act introduced specific measures to improve the efficiency of the planning process and enhance transparency, accountability, and public participation in development planning. As you know, I talked about the billboards, and which include the public and include the public's participation. Further update of the draft Physical Development Plan was an important opportunity to not only strengthen the policy and investment framework to respond to key opportunities and concerns that have emerged over the past 10 years, but also to ensure that the vision, principles, and strategic policies are consistent with the government's agenda. The following areas where further policy detail or refinement was warranted are as follows. The release of agricultural land for housing development, specifically affordable housing. The policies at both the strategic and detail levels did not support the release of tracts of agricultural land for residential purposes, and as such, releases were fundamentally inconsistent with the policies relating to managing steady-state growth and the growth management framework. No provision was made for the release of agricultural land outside the urban corridor to accommodate significant housing development. This government signaled the need to provide affordable housing for specific segments of the housing market, as well as the need to identify land for resettlement to alleviate high housing densities in aged housing estates in the urban areas and persons now living in what we call informal settlements. Moreover, the lands that were identified to fulfill these needs were mostly within the agricultural belt, and therefore the change of use of such lands to residential purposes was fundamentally at variance with the then Physical Development Plan of 2017. Articulation of housing targets to indicate the level of affordable housing required. And Mr. Speaker, it's not because I was a former Minister of Housing and the current Minister of Housing sits to my right and is doing a fantastic job, but housing is a critical part of the development of this country. My friend often says that housing is at the core of communities and having good communities for people to live in. And it's the core for organizing and understanding and keeping the temperature down within communities. And it's vital. The articulation of the housing targets in the absence of specific information on housing demand, the draft Physical Development Plan 2017 projected housing demand based on the estimated population growth and the rate of household formation. Agricultural land alienation to support renewable energy, in particular solar voltaics. The Physical Development Plan provides specific guidance for the use of land for renewable energy installations, wind and solar, and directs that such installations should utilize non-arable land. The policy was amended to provide for some use of agricultural land for renewable energy installations against the background of the national green energy targets. The agricultural subdivisions for small farming. The relevant issue under this policy gap was to ensure that small holdings are acceptable to persons wanting to pursue agriculture and to put in place supporting policy measures to ensure that such lots are sold to and occupied by genuine farmers. Investigating the use of the lands characterized as Zone A to support the green energy policy. The use of Zone A, formerly Zone 1, of the water protection areas for use as the solar farms is an incipient alternative use of such lands. Such use and related development seemingly pose little or no risk for contamination of the groundwater supply and bring additional benefit to such lands by allowing development in the national interest without compromising the protection of the groundwater sources. Such lands would then have twin land use values as aquifers and sites for green energy installations, both in the national interest. Residential built form policies, in particular the height of buildings. General guidelines on the height ranges of buildings are provided. 8 to 10 stories. 8 to 10 stories are now considered, subject to design and other criteria for urban centers and mixed-use corridors. The policies highlight the supplementary policies and practice guidance that will be required, including a tall buildings policy that will be developed to guide decision-making going forward, distinguishing ridge-to-reef and roof-to-reef concepts. The draft Physical Development Plan included a ridge-to-reef concept in the management of land use within the natural heritage system. This concept recognized that the system extends from the top of the ridge through the caves and gullies and aquifers and catchment areas towards the coastal zone and the ocean's tidal zones and reef shells and seagrass beds. The Roofs-to-Reefs program is different and is a holistic, integrated national initiative for resilient development of Barbados. More fundamentally, the Roof-to-Reef program represents the development model for Barbados over the next decade, and its foundations are the principles of sustainable development and climate change. The construction of offshore islands. The creation of offshore islands is a major planning and developmental issue that is addressed in the Physical Development Plan 2023 to reflect government's policy direction. The offshore islands are intended to, amongst other things, serve as a means of maximizing economic opportunities in the national marine space and promote land reclamation activities in coastal nearshore areas. planning obligations as a mechanism to obtain land for affordable housing, as well as other social and environmental improvements. The planning obligations framework will be used as a mechanism to obtain lands to facilitate affordable housing. This framework is also expected to be a mechanism to obtain infrastructural, social, and environmental improvements to support major development schemes. The concept of strategic reinvestment areas is incorporated as well in the Fiscal Development Plan 2023. This change includes reference to spurring reinvestment as a critical imperative and economic strategy for the sustainable future of the island. A new policy under sustainable tourism identifies Carlisle Bay as a historically significant and urban coastal landscape, and priority for tourism development is included. The Fiscal Development Plan identifies the inventory of strategic investment areas and provides for each area a narrative on the reinvestment potential, identifies the community benefit for public good for each, planning and urban design policies, and outlines any site pertinent specific considerations or processes. More specifically for each area, the policy following direction is provided to guide the scale and height of buildings, appropriate location of taller buildings, transition, views and access to the sea, public realm exploitations, environmental considerations, access, heritage considerations, urban renewal, community development, and improvement. The establishment of the Population Commission is also recognized, and its inputs will include recommendations for strategic growth for population. Moreover, the recommendations are capable of fundamentally influencing the development growth strategy, and at this stage, Fiscal Development Plan review process seems best placed to be incorporated in the next PDP cycle. The PDP amended, however, envisions and plans for steady state growth in the context of a continued low population growth rate and managed migration policy. The imperative. The foundational influence of the island's early governance and constitution, innovation in the sugar and rum industry, high levels of literacy, and its UNESCO World Heritage Site designation, recognizing the value of historic Bridgetown and its garrison, are a mere sampling of significant national accomplishments. After having received this plan, 2017, after having received the Canadian Institute Planning of Award for Excellence for International Development, the Fiscal Development Plan and National Park Development Plan are notable signs of leadership in planning. Yet, as a small and developing state, the island remains vulnerable to economic and environmental conditions. In an island of scarcity, wise use of food, water, and land resources will be critical. Their conservation and the protection of their health and viability will be important for sustainable growth. The plan therefore needed to respond to key challenges that relate to unsustainable development patterns, loss of agricultural land, and an increasing reliance on imported food, decline in human health highlighted by the alarming increases in the rate of chronic non-communicable diseases, stresses on natural systems, inefficient and unsustainable infrastructure systems and energy sources, and finally the need to diversify the economy and tourism base of the economy to create jobs and ensure long-term prosperity. Consequently, and more specifically, the Fiscal Development Plan addresses the following challenges. The challenges are: development and growth patterns over the last 2 decades are not sustainable over the long term. Between 1991 and 2013, outward growth consumed 228 hectares of land per year. Cumulatively, the urban footprint has increased 64% to accommodate the formation of new households over the same period of time. Further, this growth has been accommodated in increasingly lower densities. Between 1983 and 2011, residential density in the urban corridor declined from 23 people per hectare to 18 people per hectare. This demonstrated pattern of sprawl has implications on scarce and key assets, water, food production, land, transportation patterns, but also on public cost of buildings, operating and maintaining infrastructure over the long term. Looking to the future, whereas forecasts anticipate a gradual long-term decline in population beginning in 20 years, as well as a significant aging of the demographic, the location, scale, and type of recent housing development is not likely to serve the needs of the population well. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, if you imagine as a community, think of a community, as it expands out and sprawls, it means that you have to have more roads. It means that the water infrastructure has to go further. It means that the buses have to travel further to get to and from the center. It means that, therefore, these roads have to be maintained. The buses have to go further, so they have to be maintained. The water infrastructure, the electrical infrastructure, by virtue of the sprawl, has to be bigger and more expansive and more extensive and costs more to maintain, and has a significant impact on the ability and the viability of those communities. Approved development has significantly impacted agricultural and water resources and the health of natural ecosystems. While much of this development has occurred within the urban corridor, a significant amount has occurred on agricultural land, in particular putting pressure on some of Barbados' most fertile soils in the St. George Valley. The urban corridor is but one of the 6 general growth management and agricultural strategy areas into which the island is divided. It represents the urbanized area, largely coastal zone, in a significant proportion of the population resides and contains a full range of residential, commercial, industrial, and institutional land uses, including the location of the island's most critical infrastructure. The amount of agricultural land was reduced by 53% through conversion to other uses. This equates to a significant reduction in production capability as well as fragmentation of agricultural land. In many instances, growth is occurring well beyond the urban corridor of other planned centers for growth. In some instances, this growth has been occurring within the most sensitive groundwater protection areas, or at scale where provision of services is not efficient. The result is not planned, complete urban environments. Rather, it is fractured, disconnected, and partial urbanization. In addition, wastewater, and stormwater quality issues have had a significant impact on the natural heritage systems, with only 10% of the historic coral reef remaining healthy and 1,000 tons of garbage being produced per day. In addition to all of those challenges, there were challenges in agriculture, where the agricultural loss of agricultural land threatens the viability of the agricultural sector and increases food insecurity. In 2014, $600 million Barbados was spent on food imports. Between 2000 and 2011, food imports increased from 15% to 25% of total imports, a level which is seen as unsustainable. From 1980, the amount of agricultural land has declined from 44% of the island to 26% today. The minimum land allocation requirement for agriculture was considered to be in the region of 30,000 acres. Today, there's estimated to be 28,000 acres of agricultural land available. Fundamental shifts in agriculture and food production sectors have had a marked impact, moving away from more traditional food production practices. Barbados has been increasingly reliant on food imports. Further, the loss of agricultural land through alienation will require considerable, careful consideration of the amount of land to meet government's minimum land allocation requirement for agriculture. Rising levels of chronic non-communicable diseases are linked to development patterns and lack of access to healthy foods. Barbados is experiencing increasing rates of diabetes, some 17%, overweight 37%, and obesity 29% within the population. A rising number, now 8 out of 10 Barbadians are projected to die of a non-communicable disease. 65 plus, a segment, will increase from 11% today to 25% by 2050, hallmarks of an aging population. Lifestyle choices and patterns of development have been a significant contributor to the increasing rate of non-communicable diseases in Barbados. Increasing dependency on the car, inhospitable walking environments, and longer distances to access daily needs such as groceries, work, and school has been an acknowledged contributor to these trends. Resultant costs to healthcare provision will increase significantly. In addition, the average life expectancy is on the rise, and there's an increased proportion of population who are over 65. Planning for the needs of the population, future needs, must be a key consideration. New growth at the fringe has happened at the expense of the historic community cores and existing settlements over the past 20 years. The overall number of housing units grew by 15%, while unoccupied units grew by 118%. The St. Michael parish especially lost over 9% of its population, and today there's an estimated 20,000 vacant lots across the island. Much of recent development has been occurring on the periphery or outside of the urban corridor in St. James, St. George, and St. Philip. And of course, we see that with the number of constituencies and the growing number of constituencies seen in those parishes. At the same time, there has been an increase in vacant and derelict buildings located predominantly within the historic urban areas. There's a growing infrastructure deficit. The number of cars across the island has more than doubled, from 43,000 to 112,000. The transportation network, however, is the same today as it was 20 years ago. 38% of the distributed potable water is accounted for as revenue generating. Of course, that means that 62% is not. Today, 90% of Barbados' energy is imported, despite increasing the urban footprint by over 60% and doubling the number of cars on the island in the past 2 decades. There has been little expansion or modernization of infrastructure capacity to accommodate these patterns. Further, the availability of clean, potable water is compromised by huge inefficiencies in the delivery system. Climate change requires new thinking in planning and design of future development. Over 25% of the population lives within 2 kilometers of the coast. Most of the critical infrastructure is also within this area. There has been a rise in severe weather conditions and events. The implications of recent island-wide growth and development patterns are accentuated by the immediate and ongoing imperative created by climate change. Planning for comprehensive disaster management, resiliency, and food sovereignty are critical priorities. Strategic policies. The Physical Development Plan outlines a number of strategic policies which have been designed to enable an effective response to the development challenges that have been identified in Barbados. These policies have been organized into the following areas. 1, promoting sustainable development. An emphasis on optimizing existing settlement areas and efficient provision of infrastructure is required to respond to key imperatives of the new urban agenda. These include adapting to climate change and building resiliency, promoting healthy communities, planning for an aging community, and addressing Barbados' challenges as a small island developing state. 2, protecting core assets. This encompasses the protection of a number of features, such as the National Heritage System, water, the National Park, cultural heritage, and the reorganized established centers throughout the urban fabric. 3, greening the economy. Transitioning to a green economy is seen as pivotal in reducing the vulnerability of the nation to economic and natural shocks and charting a more sustainable development path. 4, advancing mobility and accessibility. Provision of an efficient transport service and infrastructure is fundamental to the promotion of inclusive, healthy communities and sustainable development. 5, planning for national infrastructure. This includes the full range of transportation, communication, water, sewage, sewer, renewable energy, and waste management facilities that are essential to the health, safety, economic success, and environmental health of Barbados. The process of amendment. Physical Development Plan has been prepared under the leadership of the Planning and Development Department and the Interministerial Steering Committee. The technical committee team was led by Urban Strategies, a local project lead, Equal Consulting, a highly qualified team of local, regional, and international experts. Physical Development Plan 2023 builds upon the successful components of the amended 2003 and the draft 2017. It responds to findings from technical studies, including 24 background review sectoral reports, the white paper, key considerations for the Physical Plan amendment, a recommended priority policy directions memorandum, the cabinet minutes, outcomes of the public inquiry, and the engagement with the relevant ministries and departments. Key ministries and agencies have been consulted throughout the process, including the ministries responsible for housing and lands and maintenance, agriculture, fisheries, water, environment, culture, tourism, transport and works, the Drainage Division, the Barbados Water Authority, the Coastal Zone Management, the Barbados Museum and Historical Society, the Barbados National Trust, the National Housing Corporation, the National Heritage Department, the Environmental Protection Department, and the Population Commission. Barbados' Tourism Investment Incorporated, the Barbados Sea Turtle Project, the Barbados Future Center Trust, and the Healthy Caribbean Coalition. A series of community meetings were held across the island. And finally, stakeholders were given the opportunity to make both written and verbal submissions on the Physical Development Plan 2023 during 3 public hearings in August and September 2023, respectively. The result of these consultations outlined under 11 key areas to be considered, and the document is organized into mainly 2 parts, as I said. Part A, the national policies divided into 5 sections: introduction, vision, and principles. Section 2, strategic priorities, island-wide directions organized into policy areas. Section 3, land use and built form policies. Section 4, Barbados' system of parks and open spaces. Section 5, implementation, information on protocols used to implement the policies. Part B, of course, contains the community plans that I went through earlier. In addition, it has several appendices that go A, B, and C, right through to D. Thematic policy updates. Both written and verbal feedback on the draft plan were received through public inquiry and private meetings with various entities. This resulted in a number of updates, including transitioning from a parliamentary constitutional monarchy to a parliamentary republic on November 30th, 2021. The plan was also brought into better alignment with the Planning Development Act 2019 and the Environmental Impact Assessment Regulations 2021, and now refers to the revision of the PDP every 10 years in Section 5 instead of every 5 years, and gives additional details for refined environmental impact assessments. Housing to meet the needs of the population. Implementation Policy 581 lists the outcomes of the National Population Commission. Sections 133 and 134 were amended to reflect the Commission's findings on strategic growth. Sections 211 and 2111 incorporate its recommendations for a steady, managed migration policy program and balancing housing needs and agricultural viability. Overall, the policies in the Physical Development Plan were found to respond appropriately to the recommendations of the Commission. Number 26 in Section 2.1 lists community improvement areas that were updated after consultation with the Ministry of Housing, Lands and Maintenance, who confirmed that the housing targets in the PDP were appropriate. New guidance on derelict and abandoned properties was also refined. Design excellence and guidance. The roof to reef is introduced and referred to throughout the plan, including sections 134 and 135, and 59 implementation policies. Policy number 14, section 2.1, sets out the stage and encourages design excellence for medium and high density development. A reference to hit roof design and an example of sustainable building technology and resilience in design was also added. After consulting with the public, the language in the policy on tall buildings was expanded to have regard to future design guidances in locations where taller buildings are appropriate. And examples of technical guidance documents were added on design standards for further density development. Policy number 3 states that taller buildings are appropriate in some mixed-use areas in regional centers and mixed-use corridors, and community plans provide further detailed guidance. Natural heritage system, water, and resiliency. Following consultation with the Barbados Water Authority, the groundwater protection areas Zone A to E and the associated policies were updated to include new desalination plant locations and now consists of zones A to F, while associated land use prohibitions were updated. Through the Water Authority Act Amendment 2022, the location of existing and proposed desalination plants are shown on maps 8 and 12, and policy number 26 in section 2.5 speaks to planning for water desalination. Following the passing of the Water Use Reuse Act, Section 223, number 16, encourages maximizing water reuse for all development projects. In terms of the approach to renewable energy, battery storage systems are permitted in most designated land uses with conditions. Following consultation with the EPD, the policies in Section 2.5 were found to be appropriate, and the development of technical guidance for renewable energy is highlighted in Section 2.5, Policy 5. Promoting sustainable agriculture. In terms of renewable energy and agriculture use, the refined policies include a reference to the Ministry of Agriculture's Food and Nutritional Security's draft Agriculture and Climate Change Policy document that speaks specifically to the combination of solar farms and grazing. Firstly, the coexistence of agriculture and renewable energy is addressed at a higher level in Policy 6, Section 2.1, and large-scale renewable energy projects or PV installations are generally not permitted in soil protection overlay areas unless it can be demonstrated through an agricultural impact assessment that there is no negative impact on agricultural production on those lands or surrounding lands. Also requires that prospective projects are in compliance with technical guidance documents. Secondly, the policies in Section 3.1 then provide direction related to renewable energy and agricultural land uses. References to solar grazing were added in support of dual uses of agricultural lands in Section 3.1.2. Following consultation with the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and National Security on investment in agriculture, land, and integrated rural development project, appropriate amendments to the policy were considered. The Fiscal Development Plan now includes references to potential augmentation of irrigation water as provided through the Water Reuse Bill, utilizing the existing infrastructure in the IRDP infrastructure. The PDP sets out opportunities to improve arable lands within the IRBT areas, as well as other lands designated for food and agricultural lands that may not previously have access to irrigation. The IRDP policies now allow for small-scale subdivisions in support of the small-scale farmer, with appropriate parameters to ensure that the primary land use remains agriculture, that a minimum of 1 acre lot size is maintained, and the land must be brought into or continued use for agriculture. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, I pause here because this part of the Physical Development Plan was important for me, and important that we have it included. And why I say this is many times as I assisted the Prime Minister in doing the various site visits, we would often visit people who had bought agricultural land as part of what we call the IRDP. And those sections of land were 5 acres, 6 acres, whatever, and they used it for agriculture. But of course, 40 years on, they're not able to work the ground, as Barbadians call it, as they used to. So, and of course, by that time, the family has grown. And what they hoped to do and planned to do was to subdivide their 5 acres into either 2.5 acre lots, subdivide off their house and have another 2 acres or 3 acre lots, whatever, 3 1 acre lots available for their children, so that their children could continue in their own right in agriculture and at the same time have an opportunity to have a house on that land, because agricultural land is allowed 1 house. Of course, what would happen all the time is we butt up against the policy that no subdivision of these lands was allowed. And I thought it absolutely unfair to those people who had diligently worked that land for years, who had complied and were able to subscribe to a system that was there for 40 years, to now be given an opportunity for their children to benefit, either to continue in agriculture or to benefit from the land that they grew up on, was of course a necessity. And this is absolutely an important policy that has been included in this new Physical Development Plan. These refined policies provide important direction on investment in agriculture and IRDP lands, development and cumulative impacts on urban structure. It is recognized that the cumulative impacts of successive developments must be considered in assessing the adequacy and existing infrastructure, and the Physical Development Plan highlights this principle. In this regard, the implementation policy framework was strengthened to specify transportation and servicing capacity to be demonstrated through a comprehensive design framework for major site development. In that vein, the Warrens Community Plan has been amended and sets out a master planning requirement for large sites, where the preparation of a design framework that demonstrates the comprehensive design consideration of land uses, heights and densities, transportation networks, walkability, public open space, shoreline access, community amenity, and resiliency planned on the site to contribute to healthy and complete communities will be encouraged in policy number 7 in section 3.3. You know, immediately, Mr. Speaker, when I see the discussion of a master plan, I look to the gallery and I see the Director General, who has held my hand and gave me so much support in getting this physical development plan to where it is today. And I look to her because she is adamant that master plans for all these areas must be put together. And I will be coming very shortly to Cabinet with a recommendation that we must have master plans as recommended here, not only for Warrens, but also for the area by the Botanical Gardens, because we have the Botanical Gardens, the stadium, and the geriatric hospital going there. A master plan for Oistins, a better master plan for Whole Town, so that we develop master plans outlining the strategy for the development of these areas and Carlisle Bay, a better master plan for Bridgetown, building on the previous master plans that were done. And through the guidance of the Director General and the rest of the team, and I can call their names, Gabrielle Springer, I'm not calling them disparately, Stig Merritt, and now Mr. Daniel Best has joined. This small team has been able to pull all this together with the Planning and Development Department, to be able to provide a document that Barbados and the Barbadian community and the people of Barbados can be justly proud. Sustainable transportation. Following consultation with the Ministry of Transport, Works and Water Resources, and the Future Centre Trust, the mobility map at map 11 was updated with new mobility nodes at Gall Hill, St. John, Oistins, Christchurch, and Black Bess St. Peter. Additional trails have been identified, and the Physical Development Plan provides directions or the identification of new mobility nodes and an active transportation and trailhead hub. Map 11 also shows location of mobility nodes in key mobility corridors. The importance of and effectiveness of the public consultation process is underscored by the amendments to the Physical Development Plan. The public consultation with the Future Centre Trust on the Barbados Trailway and active transportation resulted in an update to the list of park and ride nodes to include 3 new mobility node park and ride locations at Figure 6, Section 2.4. The new active transportation hub trailhead category was added with new language on investments on supporting infrastructure for active transportation. Policies were added that speak to multimodal trail and opportunities to secure easements and locate an active transportation node. Consultation between the Planning and Development Department and the MTW on an update road classification system has also now been introduced, and the amended classifications made significantly throughout the Physical Development Plan. Strategic reinvestment areas, Oistins Park and Ride Mobility Hub, and a relocation of the bus terminal to the public site in inland is already captured in the Oistins Community Plan, but a land use change was necessary for institutional to mixed use on the shoreline site. These amendments are consistent with government policy to allow the highest and best use of prime shoreline sites while providing the community with enhanced civic and social services at suitable alternative locations. Following consultation, the relevant schedule has been updated and a change in land use designations to tourism to reflect the strategic reinvestment area was made. In addition, the policies have been updated to reflect the intention for mixed-use development in partnership with developers and a thrust to retain shoreline access and public space within redevelopment. Reclamation of land for islands. Following consultation with Barbados Tourism Investment on the approach to the reclamation of land and a review of cabinet minutes, physical development plan was considered to respond appropriately to the sustainable tourism section of the physical development plan and provides for the construction of new islands and peninsulas once key criteria outlined in the policy are met: natural heritage, beach access, and public beach facilities. The Planning Development Department and the consultants received a great deal of input from a range of sources about the protection of existing public beach access areas, the sea turtles' habitat, and identification of additional accesses to the beach. The feedback received from the Barbados Sea Turtle Project during the public consultation resulted in an update of the physical development plan to provide direction on protection of the existing accesses and providing new shoreline access through development. Section 4A, system parks and open spaces. Regarding vehicle parking for the public when going to the beach, there were calls during the public inquiry for more specific language around vehicular access to the shoreline. This representation resulted in policy reinforcement that now includes reference to providing and protecting pickup and drop-off points along the shoreline. Locating new hotels away from the coast was also a discussion point during the public consultation, and the relevant policies were highlighted in sections 11, 14, and sections 2, 3, which speak to heritage and national park tourism. The following review of recently completed national wetland inventory, a new implementation policy was added to consider an update to the outdated 1999 Park Development Plan, and this may be seen at section 538. Biodiversity and sea turtle habitat protections. New information on the National Index Beaches for Protected Turtle Species confirmed the importance of the Drill Hall Beach as a marine conservation area. It resulted in recognition of the index protection of the turtle habitat and the need for development setbacks and good management of the construction process. The policies have been strengthened to include requirements for the creation of beach management plans, particularly related to endangered species habitats. The environmental impact assessment process was reviewed and now highlights that the required environmental impact statement for major development or change of use applications within 50 meters of any key component of natural heritage systems needs to analyze any impacts to marine environments and habitat while identifying mitigation measures that result in no net negative impact. The amendments now include reference to the Natural Heritage Department in the list of agencies consulted on any alteration, extension, or change of use on or adjacent to a cultural heritage asset. Sands, mines, and quarries. Following the public inquiry feedback about the need to update the location and approximate extent of the existing mines and quarries were noted. Unfortunately, the required mapping data was not available to update the map 14, but in the PDP, but appropriate referencing has been noted for further updates. This is further reinforced in section dealing with new quarries. Other notable updates, feedback was submitted that recommended more recognition of layers as a major employment industrial area. This resulted in an acknowledgement of layers and other areas of economic importance where there are clusters of employment uses. These areas may warrant future designation as regional centers and the preparation of new community plans and will be considered even now as we look to our future strategic planning. Written feedback from the public on the draft plan and data on approved development applications resulted in certain amendments as well to reflect name changes of sites, such as the Bathsheba Community Plan, where references to the old Edgewater Hotel were removed and updated land ownership recognized. In conclusion, strategic planning and the Physical Development Plan 2023. The goals of our updated planning legislation, the Planning and Development Act 2019, and its subsidiary legislation essentially provide for the orderly, and progressive development of land. The grant of planning permission to development of land and powers to regulate land use and development. Such goals cannot be attained without an appropriate vision and strategy for planning and development. That planning is essential to ensure the complementarity of our national sectoral policies. The updated Physical Development Plan, as amended 2023, is the vehicle for ensuring such complementarity as it articulates our vision, strategies, and policies for land use, planning, and physical development in Barbados. It is a necessary corollary to providing the framework for decision-making. We regard the amendment of the Physical Development Plan as an opportunity to set in place transformational and foundational changes to the patterns of growth, mobility, and the provision of infrastructure. It is an opportunity to support Barbados' transformation to a green economy and to plan sustainably for the needs and potential of future generations of Barbados. Transitioning to not only a green, but also a blue economy is seen as pivotal in reducing the vulnerability of our nation to economic and natural shocks and charting a more sustainable development plan. In this regard, promoting and sustaining a green and blue economy is an underlying direction that guides the scope and focus of the Physical Development Plan 2023 policies. That direction will set a critical and divergent path for the future of Barbados. The key directions in the Physical Development Plan 2023 include adopting resiliency and adaptation strategies as cross-cutting and critical considerations in all aspects of the Physical Development Plan. Integrating a national cultural heritage strategy based solely in the UNESCO World Heritage Site Management Plan directions, but also recognizing island-wide cultural heritage assets. Introducing the highest level of protection and acknowledgement for core and irreplaceable assets, including water zones, priority food zones, community cores, and natural heritage ecosystems. Expanding the protection and integration of natural heritage features to include an ecosystem approach that integrates and manages the health of terrestrial, coastal, and marine systems together as a critical decision-making tool for land use planning. Adopting the roof-to-reef concept as the development model for Barbados. Defining a transportation network that balances modes and supports mobility strategies that are responsive to scale, character, and efficient movement patterns for people and goods. Defining a new settlement framework or structure that prioritizes core and irreplaceable assets while recognizing and planning sustainably for the current attributes and future settlement patterns on the island. The plan is designed to strengthen Barbados' communities by recognizing and focusing on the distinct nature of communities and promoting reinvestment and economic viability of their cores. In doing so, ensuring that the efficient and effective delivery of critical services and amenities to all communities. Creating a physical development plan that is a framework and a tool for investment, both public and private. A document and a tool that is accessible and supports a responsible and transparent process for planning and infrastructure decisions. Mr. Speaker, national development is about improving a nation. Improving a nation to improve a population's living standards. A central objective of the Physical Development Plan must be to give the physical aspects of planning and development a more central role within government policy making. It helps to coordinate and align national projects in urbanization, infrastructure, transportation, and the wealth-creating sectors. And this, above all, is a model for how government must work going forward. Everybody working together, pulling in the same direction, working as a team. With those few words, Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged.
Honourable member, you have to move that the resolution do not pass before you sit down.
Mr. Speaker, in light of all of those few short words, I forgot the most important.
Correct.
And of course, I could not have spent so long on my feet making such a historic presentation and not now move that this resolution do not pass.
Honourable St. Michael South Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have to thank the honourable member who led in this resolution, not just for his very thorough presentation on this physical development plan, but also for taking something that is so central to the prospects of Barbados and Barbadians, continuing to take it very seriously as the now Minister of Planning, continuing to work very well and very closely with the officers of the Planning and Development Department, who also take this work extremely seriously. And in fact, it is really their lead that we follow when we come to understand how important this work is for the prospects and the development and the future of Barbados and Barbadians. So I will not repeat all of the thanks. He has called all of the names. I will only say that I felt very privileged to have been a part of this process. I feel that we took it very seriously, and I'm glad to see, after I've made several calls to see the plan and to have it function, because I hope in my brief remarks to get to that question of its functioning and of its use. But I'm very happy to see that we are here at this point. You know, Mr. Speaker, one of the other reasons that I had felt so privileged to work with the Planning and Development Department is that, you know, as a development economist, as someone who's been a practitioner, sometimes you come to this work with a particular perspective, and you come to this work with a particular set of skills, and you try your best to use those and to expand those. But I do have to say thanks to the officers of Planning and Development Department for the opportunity to expand even more in terms of the area of physical planning. I say to them all the time that they are great teachers, and they have been. And I think that the relationship between a minister who is meant to guide policy and the practitioners who are experts in their field is key, because ministers have to do the learning a lot of the time if you do not come with the particular skills. And it was certainly a privilege for me to be able to do a lot of that learning together with them. And it has really been one of the joys of my ministerial career. I say has been and not was, because I will leave that hanging there. But, sir, I start there because, you know, I have a very good colleague, a Jamaican economist, who's now at MIT. And he is an associate professor of political economics and urban planning. And when I saw him make that twinning and make that decision, it occurred to me that economics is really about the provisioning of goods and services and well-being to people. To people. It's not about numbers. It is about provisioning to people. And one of the greatest assets we have to provision to people is the physical environment. How do we manage this physical environment so that the people whom we serve can protect it, but also benefit from it? Can protect it, because we are not here just to exploit the earth, can protect it and benefit from it such that we preserve it for future generations. That's the business of economics. And so when my colleague ended up in the area of urban planning and economics, it made perfect sense. I say that to say what? That there can be no separation really of this question of understanding and managing resources for economic and social development without looking at physical development. And if one looks at these volumes, one sees how central physical planning is to everything that we do. And sometimes I don't think we understand how central it is. The Honourable Member for Christchurch West gave a very, very thorough background in terms of the history of the Physical Development Plan. But I want to come to the background from perhaps a slightly different perspective, and that was from the experience of working in planning and considering certain applications. And the Physical Development Plan, you will find, speaks to the tensions that exist in planning, especially in a country of the size of Barbados. And what do I mean? The Chief Town Planner, the then Chief Town Planner, would receive, and I say the Chief Town Planner because regulatory procedures are managed by the regulator. The Minister, nor the Prime Minister, nor the Cabinet are not the regulator. The Director of Planning and Development and the team are the regulator. And so when a decision is made, and along with the board that now exists, so when a decision is made, it is made at that level. And it is only where the minister has to come in to perhaps adjudicate a matter, for want of a better word, that then the minister has a role. But I want it to be clear that this is a regulatory process that is handled by the regulators, and the regulators in this matter, in these matters, are the Planning and Development Department. But there are certain tensions that necessarily exist when it comes to planning in a small island. It means that you have tensions, for example, between agriculture, land for that use, land for the purpose of housing, land for the purpose of commercial development, land for the purpose of renewable energy and meeting the targets that have been set for 2030, land for the purpose of recreation. These are the tensions that exist. And I call them tensions, and the minister, the member for Christchurch West made reference to it in the language of the PDP. And the language of the PDP talks about alienation of agricultural lands, which I think is a very loaded word. It is such a loaded word, and it is so used because, and the officers will tell you that because the process of considering an application means that you are getting comments back from certain sectors, you would have a situation where there's a commercial application. And our friends in agriculture would say, no, that's agricultural land. And PDP says, that's agricultural land, and we're not going any further with this. As I would often remind the officers, that your guidance is a recommendation. It's not an approval or a denial. But one understands the tension because there are several competing draws on the resources that we have. We have to grow food. We have to build houses. We want to make sure that our supply of energy is sustainable. We want to have businesses. We want to run boat and play football. We want to breathe clean air, so we don't want to live in concrete jungles. These are all the competing tensions. And I recall at one point saying to the then deputy chief, where do we put all of these competing needs together in one place so that we can see and understand how much we have land and then how we use it? And there began the conversation of the then draft 2017 Physical Development Plan. And the fact that, as it was, and you know, politically people tend not to say these things, but as it was in 2017, it was a very solid document. People get frightened to refer to former administrations, but it's not about the administration. In this case, it's about the officers and the team that worked on it. It was a solid document, but what it did not benefit from was all the things that had so rapidly changed and were continuing to change in that intervening period. And the honourable member made reference to so many of them. And so we realized that there were certain things that we had to amend. We had to account for. We had to look at this question of heights. And it is still something that concerns me today, because I wonder how much we will continue to spread out in single-family dwellings for housing rather than go up. And I'm sure that the honourable member who's responsible for housing, when he addresses these matters, will have a perspective that I'm sure reflects whatever is the cabinet's perspective. But this amendment came from very practical needs and concerns. And it also had to consider the issue of population. And I want to make something very clear from this honourable place, because it is a bit of a curiosity to me. The conversation that we are having about population, the conversation that has been led by the Population Commission, the recommendations that the Cabinet then considered and took. When we talk about what is the trajectory of the population, the fact that we now do not have enough people to be able to sustain the standard of living that Barbadians expect. That's what it's about, you know. It's not about just getting more people because we like to look at people. Barbadians have certain expectations, and there's a population base that must hold those up. And when the member for St. Michael Northeast, the Honourable Prime Minister, keeps referring to population, it is not to ask people to go out and do the natural thing that would naturally increase the population. That is not the call. Let me be clear on that once and for all. So for all the people that whenever we see a reference to population, we think it is about saying, go and have more children. Well, yes, I mean, if people would like to naturally grow the population in a way that makes sense to them, that is a natural thing. Government cannot legislate that. Although there are things that can be done and that are contemplated in the population report to make it so that families, as they grow, are supported. That is an important policy decision. But when we talk about population and how we grow it, the chief call there is managed migration. How do we create an environment here first, and then create policies that allow us to attract groups of people who will contribute to the growth and prosperity of the country alongside all Barbadians? The population report, importantly, and I encourage Barbadians to have a look, first talked about making sure that all Barbadians who are alive now can contribute, can be productive first and foremost before we start to look at growing the population through managed migration. The population report looks at the extent to which young people are able to find work and find income and be productive, the extent to which all groups of Barbadians first are able to contribute, but even with the highest levels of productivity of the Barbadian population as counted by the last census, we still cannot get there. And so it then calls on the Honourable Member for Christchurch East, the Honourable Minister responsible for immigration, to challenge us and tell us, how are we going to come up with these kinds of policies? So I wanted, sir, to settle that matter, that when we're talking about population, we are first looking at making sure that our current population and their future generations have a role, have a stake, have a say, are able to meet their full productive capacity first. We look second at policies that support families and the proper functioning of the family. And we then look at the question of managed migration. But all of these things come in to the need for a physical development plan. And the honourable member talked about master planning. You know, sometimes I think that it perhaps takes not the first woman or not the second woman, but maybe the third or fourth woman to repeat something so that the man hears it. Because I know that the Director General was not the first to talk to the honourable member about master planning. But I'm glad that her words on that occasion were the ones that stuck. And I want to say that I do agree fully. And I recall that when the honourable member was Minister of Housing, we had that conversation about the need for a master plan in the housing sector. Because master planning is not just about geographical area, it is about purpose. It is not just about looking at Warrens or looking at Oystons or looking at Spikestown or looking at Bridgetown. It is about purpose. We need to master plan by purpose. So that we need to master plan housing, so that if we know we are targeting 30,000 or 40,000 or 100,000 homes, we need to understand how we're getting there, not just in terms of land space, but in terms of housing approach, in terms of technology, and so on. We need master planning in transport and works. We need master planning in transport and works. So that this master planning is not just about the area, but it is what are we aiming to deliver. And when you start with the what are you aiming to deliver, then perhaps you get to where can you best deliver these things. How do people want to live? How are people moving? How do we want people to start to move? And I'll give you an example that is featured in the physical development plan. You know, we talk about the renewable energy goals and targets, and how do we not just decrease our own emissions, but how do we reduce our fuel bill or energy costs? Because importing fossil fuels is so expensive for us as a small country. And so we know that the renewable energy goals will not just call for electric vehicles, and I do know that the government is having these conversations really about the financing, the economics of this issue, the cost of batteries, the infrastructure of recharging. These are very important things. This sector is not going to go anywhere unless people have settled in their minds that it's sustainable to have electric vehicles. It's not going to go anywhere. And so I hope and I do recall that the Ministry of Finance was doing some work in that regard to say, not just from a macro perspective, what are we losing in terms of revenue, but how can the average person afford to drive an electric vehicle? We know where the gas stations are. Do we know how many charging stations we're going to need and whether we'll have the wherewithal to do it? Do we know how much it's going to cost to replace a battery after 6 or 7 or 10 years? And so this is the information that is required. But further to that, we're not going to get to this place just by switching out each car that exists on the road today for an electric vehicle. We actually need to have fewer vehicles. I don't know if it's something that Barbadians are yet willing to confront, but we actually literally need to have fewer cars on the road. In order for us to do that, and I've said this in this honorable place before, in order for us to do that, it means that you, Mr. Speaker, would be happy, and the honorable member who just spoke, would be happy to leave your cars at home or get rid of them and take public transportation. Because if we in here are not willing to do it, if it's not up to a standard that we would access, we can't ask the rest of the Barbadian public to do it. And so all of these policy ideas must be contemplated when we talk about master planning in a sector. Sir, before I continue, I do have to speak to the question of the role and the purpose of the plan, of the physical development plan. I think we have understood from the member for Christchurch West what it is and why it is so important. But I would not know how to retire from having the floor here now without raising something that was, again, one of the tensions when we worked together as a team in the Planning and Development Department, which is what is the role of the plan? How does it fit with the Planning and Development Act? Because this is a plan. This is a vision. The act is law. And so I think it is important to call the attention of those who would want to review the plan to the sections 5.1 and 5.2. 5.1 of the plan speaks directly to its role. And the fact that the purpose of the implementation section is to provide direction, interpretation in applying the policies of the plan. But the plan itself provides policies that establish the what and where conservation, settlement, and infrastructure investment should occur. And the implementation section of the plan talks about how these policies would be implemented. Now, I would not be able, of course, to go through all of the functions, but I think it's important for people to understand, and when I say people, I mean the clients of the Planning and Development Department. Developers, I mean, invariably everyone is a client of the Planning and Development Department at some point, almost. But the plan is meant to provide standards for the approval of planning applications. It's meant to provide standards for the consideration and approval of the planning applications for all development. It's meant to provide guidance on locations and priorities for the public and the private sector. Why is that important? You know, when you are responsible for physical planning and investment, often, and I think it comes from a way that we approach governance, and it regrettably comes from some perhaps past bad practices of previous administrations. But when you're responsible for planning and investment, often you get a call from somebody who says, I want to do X or Y, and I want to talk to you about it. And certainly for me, one of the things I would say is, oh, you don't need to talk to me about it. If you are clear on what you want to achieve, where you want to do it, you've identified the land, you have your plans, kindly make your application and the regulators will handle it. Now that may seem a bit hands-off, but I'll tell you why that's important and why this is important. The private sector and the public sector need predictability in their investments. The private sector has been crying out, and this is a global private sector, not just here in Barbados, for an understanding of what will find favor with the regulator and under what circumstances. And when we came to service in 2018 as a government, that was one of our priorities when it came to planning and investment, to give predictability. Why? Not just so people can plan their business and invest more successfully and have a greater chance of being told yes rather than no, but quite frankly, because if you make the regulatory process as open and transparent as possible, there's less of a place for corruption. Nobody has to call you and ask you for a favor to favorably consider something that is falling outside because they don't know what will fly. What will fly is here. What is likely to fly from the perspective of the regulator and the overall development goals of the government is here set out in the physical development plan. Now, the role of the plan is to give that guidance and show that alignment, and is to act as a framework for decision-making that is accessible and available to all people, citizens, landowners, investors, and government officials. And so, applications that, in the opinion of the Director of Planning and Development, that conform with the policies of the PDP, in the case where those applications do not conform with the policies of the PDP, the applicant may be refused without further consideration. May be refused. And what I mean by this is that if an application is submitted and it is clearly in contravention or against the overall guidelines or purpose or direction of the PDP, it may be refused without further consideration. But I think it's important for people to understand that that's not the end. It may be refused, but the Director of Planning and Development may deem further consideration of the application warranted. And all of that to say that the PDP is not a rule book. And so the Director of Planning might say, look, this is in such contravention of the PDP, we cannot consider it. Or she or he may say, it does not strictly conform to what we have in the PDP, but it is worthy of further consideration for a certain number of reasons. I think it's important to make that clear, because in our conversations, I think there has been this notion that the PDP is not law. It is not law, but it accompanies the act. It sets out the guidance, and it makes it much easier for the regulators to be able to show why an application may not go forward, or to be able to say, well, this calls for some change to the PDP, but we believe that it is a worthwhile change. And in such cases, the PDP may actually have to be amended as a result of the importance of that application. And it is right here mentioned in the document itself. But I encourage everyone to look at pages 170 and on, sections 5.1 and 5.2, because it very importantly and very, very necessarily talks about the role and the purpose of the plan. I have to say, though, that I think that the predictability that is given here in this document has to be matched by a certain level of predictability in the economic or financial, on the economic or financial side. So that just as an investor, and when I say investor, I mean anyone here in Barbados or abroad, will want to know what are their chances of getting a yes, and those chances are laid out in this PDP. Similarly, they will also want to know what are their options for fiscal incentives. And that framework should be similarly predictable, should come here just as this PDP has come here, so that on the one hand, investors understand these are the physical requirements, on the other, these are the financial requirements. This is what I can ask for. Don't ask me for anything that's not in here. And this is what would require a special, a very special dispensation with a process for getting that special dispensation. That process is not a phone call to somebody that you hope can do you a favor. What I mean to say is that we can pass as much legislation as we want, but if we do not accompany that with more predictable and clear systems that people can look at something and see what to expect, we are not in anything. So, sir, with that, I want to come quickly to the real practical purpose of this document. And really, the honourable member said it before me. It is really about the orderly development of the country. The orderly development of the country. And, you know, I think that we have an opportunity with the passing of this resolution, once, if it does pass, we have an opportunity to stop leaving things dangling. And I really feel that that this government has created such a landscape for real development to take place. When I say real development, I don't just mean numbers and growth, which is important, a necessary but not sufficient condition for the development of people, right? But such a clear landscape. But I feel that, there's some further leveling that has to be done. So, for example, the document makes reference to strategic reinvestment areas. I know the Honourable Member for the City of Bridgetown, not to set him up, but he's likely to have a lot to say on this. When we hosted the Tourism Investment Forum in 2019, that was where strategic reinvestment areas for Greater Bridgetown really was the focus. And one of the things we determined then, and it was very clear in the messages of both myself and the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast to those who had come to be a part of the forum, that first and foremost, the urban renewal and strategic reinvestment of the urban area is first and foremost about Barbadians, about the people living in those areas. We want the investment, we want the development, but we said to the investors at that time, understand that you are not coming here and building things and leaving people in the surrounding communities behind. These communities must be better off for you having built something here and operating something here. That was a clear message. And I believe that that must continue to be the message when it comes to these strategic reinvestment areas. And so we have, the government of Barbados has a policy, has a piece of legislation on vending zones, on vending. There must be an integration in the implementation of that legislation and this physical development plan, so that these strategic reinvestment areas cannot just be about saying, we believe that this kind of establishment can go here and this kind of establishment can go there. But it must also be about integrating people's livelihoods into those areas. Where is the administration of vending zones such that we do have this orderly development of the country? Because we have to be careful that we don't promote rights without responsibilities. We have to be careful that we don't promote the rights of people to vend without the responsibilities that accompany those rights. And so the orderly development, the predictable development might mean that vending takes place in certain areas in a certain way. I do not see so far where we are executing that. I know that I am working my hardest to have the Halls Road Commercial Village established after having it been approved. But this is an example, sir, of what I mean by strategic reinvestment areas working for the people that live there. Because I certainly don't want to see more hotels in town before I see the Halls Road Commercial Village in town. I certainly do not want to see that we are focusing investment on foreign direct investment and not also bringing along the people who have been, that's the private sector there in Halls Road, That's the private sector. Private sector don't always be sitting down in a fancy room at Lloyd Erskine in a jacket and a tie. And so I hope that we take this physical development plan as an opportunity to fast track these efforts that are really going to be touching people. The issue of signage. I don't want to, sir, be kind of one of those people that's still, shaking his stick at people and saying, in my day, I never want to be that, because I plan to be young forever. But I recall that when we were working together as a team on the Planning and Development Act, the issue of signage, how do people put up signs? What kinds of signs? Whether they would be these big neon electronic signs all over the place, or whether they would fit into the amenity of the area. Can people park a car that's for sale and say, well, this car is for sale, I'm going to drop it here on this shoulder, this road? That is what we mean when we talk about orderly development, and that is really one of the things that has to be thought of when we talk about master planning areas. I really anticipate that as part of the change management that is currently going on in the Planning and Development Department, that there will be more emphasis on the forward planning function of the department. And I know the honourable member is listening to me closely, because I think he and I agree on how critical this is. None of this is possible. All of what you see in the physical development plan is forward planning. Master planning is forward planning. So the role of the Planning and Development Department is not just about reviewing applications. It is not just about enforcement, which is another area that requires significant investment. I don't mean to sound like I'm moralizing to the minister. He knows and agrees, and he's working very hard on all these matters. The question of enforcement, but also all of this is forward planning, meaning to say that, you can tell when a country happened by chance. You can tell when development happened by chance. Something pop up there, it looks one way. Something pop up next to it, it looks another way. And the honourable member said something very important, that it is about cumulative impact. But I will go further to say that it's about cumulative and concurrent impact of things. Now, the pattern of the Planning and Development Department is to review applications in isolation, which most planning and development departments do. You get an application, you look at that. Another officer is next to you, she or he is looking at a different application, you look at that. Those two things might be next to one another and look completely different from each other. And so really, there has to be a mechanism by which you are considering applications in one area together to say, what do we want this area to look like? What do Barbadians want this area to feel like? What do Barbadians do in this area? Do they go to the beach? Do they go fishing? Do they lime? Do they work? Do they only pass through? All of that is what physical development planning and forward planning are about, but we need to take it to the next level where we're not just approving applications, we're not just doing enforcement, which we need to do more of, and we need to do more, we need to be more vigilant. So we need to be looking at buildings, at developments as they're going up and realizing, look, this is not what we agreed that you could do, so undo this and start over. It calls for resources, I understand, the officers are stretched, but I hope that if we believe and agree that this document is critical, that we put the resources behind being able to give it effect. Sir, I want to come to two final issues. And I don't want to preempt the honourable member for the city of Bridgetown, but having worked on the Tourism Investment Forum and the strategic reinvestment areas, Bridgetown and the Greater Carlisle Bay area, and having had a central place in how government at the time was seeking investment, I do have to speak to the issue of Bridgetown. And what do we want Bridgetown to be? Because the planners will tell you that, and the demographers will tell you, that settlements happen along particular lines. People settle in areas for different reasons. We know that St. Joseph and St. John populations are declining. We know that the residential population of St. Michael is also constantly in flux. So what we have to think about is, why are people moving? What are they moving for? And what do we want Bridgetown to be? Now, there is an Urban Development Commission there is Barbados Tourism Investment, Inc. There was a conversation some time ago, and I remember raising the issue that a place like Bridgetown requires something like a Bridgetown Investment Management Company. It requires a focused, somebody has to come to work every day to flog that adage. Somebody has to come to work every day to deal with that. And unlike what people believe, the government alone cannot reinvigorate Bridgetown. I recall that when we were looking at certain developments on the west coast of the country and certain developments in Bridgetown on the south coast of the country, that we considered that we should have a fund so that those developers who were coming to have developments in those areas also understood that the overall maintenance of the area required the efforts and the finances of all who were having investments there. And there was meant to be established a Bridgetown Rehabilitation Fund, I think it was called, or something to that effect, which would mean that for things like drainage and sanitation and sewage and road maintenance and certain community efforts, that those developers would contribute some percentage of the value of the investment to these efforts. Similarly, I think that a Bridgetown Management Company would have to have several functions. The first would be to explore and secure investment in the Bridgetown area. You know, nobody wants to be the first mover. Everybody wants to go and build something in a place that already looks nice, but it's not going to already look nice if nobody ever builds anything. And so the government may have to consider some kind of first mover advantage. If you're the first to build, if you're the first mover, if you are bold enough to bet on the people of Barbados and bet on the people of Bridgetown, and to trust, then you may get some first mover incentive for having done that. But everybody who's sitting back and waiting to see, well, who's going to build next door so I could go and build next to a pretty building, well, if everybody wait for a pretty building to go up first, no pretty building is going to go up. And so the first function of that company must be to chase investment. But it must also be, quite frankly, to liaise with those who already, who remain there. And I have to say to the people who make their commerce, who make their living in Bridgetown, that they are brave. That they are brave. That they have shown that they believe in Bridgetown as the capital of Barbados, and they're staying there, even against all odds. And many of the merchants, to use a dated expression, who are there, are remaining there because they believe in it. But I think that a Bridgetown Management Company will have to engage them to say, look, we need to get together and think about what we want Bridgetown to be. How are we going to fund that? Because this is the private sector. Government has to maintain the common infrastructure. Government has to maintain the public goods. But when it comes to how buildings are being kept and whether people have the resources to be able to refurbish and repaint and so on, that has to be the business of a Bridgetown Management Company. Because while we have the Urban Development Commission, we all know the resources are stretched with basic urban needs. While we have BTI, well, BTI could benefit from more resources, but also does everything from St. Lucie to Christchurch. Who is showing up to deal with Bridgetown? And finally, sir, you know, this physical development plan is, the honourable member who spoke talked about the fact that it won awards, that once it passes, it will be the first of its kind in our part of the world. It is a tremendous accomplishment. The proof of it will be in its execution. But having just gotten here alone, I really think that the leadership and the officers of the Planning and Development Department, and the Honourable Member should feel very proud of that. But I will say that there is work to do in cleaning up some of the dangling things, and one of those is, and anyone who knows the work that we did on the Planning and Development Act would understand why I raised this. I know that the Honourable Member for Christchurch West, and certainly the rest of government, and certainly not me, I don't need to hear from other quarters about the importance of a building code. And I'll tell you why I don't need to hear from other quarters, even though people are at liberty to do their advocacy and should continue to do so. I don't need to hear from other quarters about the importance of a building code, because a building code was contemplated as part of the Planning and Development Act. It's not a secret. And I really feel that the test of our generation of political servants, the test of our generation of political servants, is whether and to what extent we are willing to hold to principle over political expediency. The notion that building codes are onerous on the poor is a fallacy. Building codes benefit the poor. And why is that? Because when I take up the last $6,000 that I saved up and that my children went to work and helped me put some money down for, to make a change to my house, and the person who does the work does it poorly, I can't find another $6,000 in my lifetime to do it. I would like us to stop perpetuating the notion that regulations are necessarily onus on the poor. They could be. Our job is to make sure they are not. But to run in the other direction from a building code or from parts of the legislation that speak to occupancy and having certain standards for occupancy is to do a disservice to the poor in this country. And if I sound strident and if I sound resolute, it is because I feel strongly about it. When somebody who can least afford it takes up their last money and gives to a contractor or gives to an artisan, and then work is poorly done, and they're at risk, it is a cost to the government, first of all, but it is also a cost to that family. So with all due respect to those who are shouting from their various quarters about the need for a building code, I would dare say that this government knows it. And it was contemplated that we would have a system, a revised system, because you just can't have a building code and go from there. It has to be administered. A revised system with respect to planning and development that would allow for certain standards of building and certain standards of occupancy to be met. So this physical development plan is to be commended. It is tremendous work. And I may not be at liberty anymore to feel proud of my team, but I feel proud of my team. I included the member for Christchurch West as well. And I say that because, you know, we in this part of the world inherited all kind of hierarchical systems from our colonizers. And institutions need order. But I think that it is when we realize that it is about how a team works together and all of the various skills and observations and arguments. I tell people all the time, you can't hurt my feelings if you argue with me about a point on the work that we're doing. You can't hurt my feelings. I want you to. I want you to defend what you are representing. I want you to win, because that will mean that you are right and you know what you're doing. And so I think that this document reflects the best of that spirit, of all ideas contending within the Planning and Development Department. I would not know how to sit down without also mentioning two of the names that the Honourable Member mentioned, George and Melanie from Urban Strategies and their team. You know, sitting with them, I really hope for Barbadians that we get over what can sometimes be our natural insularity and natural defensiveness against what we consider other and outside and foreign. Because often those people are the biggest friends of Barbados that you will ever meet. It is quite the thing to sit in a meeting with two people.
The honourable member has 2 more minutes.
I will honor that, sir. Two people who are from another place, and to have them talk about this lane and this alley, and that's the place that where you go through that alley, that's where the guy they sell these sandals. And these are people that are not from here, that do not live here, but that had so integrated into Barbados that they were able to teach us all things about Barbados that we did not know. That is the spirit in which this PDP has been developed. I think it is a tremendous opportunity for Barbadians to understand the vision and to be a part of the vision as they have been up to this time. This document benefits from a high degree of consultation, as have most documents that have come to this place. Sir, all that is left for me to do is to commend the honourable member for Christchurch West, to give my thanks and utmost appreciation to the Planning and Development Department, to encourage them to press on, because their work is important to the people of Barbados, and to say that this document must be just the beginning of how we, as the honourable member said, integrate all of our planning processes and work together for the best prospects and outcomes of the people of this country. With that, sir, I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until 2:15 p.m.
Question is that this honourable chamber be suspended until 2:15 p.m. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting, the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands suspended until 2:15 p.m.